Okay, I'm just going to leave now. So I'll see you later. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Welcome to Hong Kong. Thank you. Coming here for the first time. So yeah, I have a reason to come over here. I'm gonna explore the Wang Nai Chang Gap. So oh yeah. I was researching and I just got to know that my grandfather sacrificed his life out there. So I think I'm gonna explore more about that area. And I want to extract some more information. Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Okay, let's go. Whoa, what a refreshing view.
Yeah, hard today. One battle has broken out here, and blood has flown like stream. Look at this document. 160 out of 230 defenders who engaged in the decisive battle were died, whereas the Japanese invaders reported lost more than 8 men, which were at least 5 times higher than that of the defending party.
That's quite shocking. I heard there were 9 officers involved in the battle. But yeah, misfortunately my grandpa was one of the 6 who sacrificed their life.
The history has gone, but the respectful spirit is always present. Hey guys, let's go.
Oh, where is Alice?
She's feeling safe. She's not available today. Never mind, just go.
Okay.
On the 18th and 19th of December in 1941 at Wang Nai Chong Gap, Hong Kong experienced one of the bloodiest battles in its military history. Although the gap was eventually lost to Japanese invaders, the Wang Nai Chong Gap Trail was set up in commemoration of the bravery of defenders in the fierce battle.
The trail encompasses the water catchment area, starting off at Taipan Reservoir Road, across Sir Cecil's Right, and ends at the West Brigade headquarters on Wang Nai Chong Gap Road.
Back in 1941, in which World War II broke out, the ambitious Japanese army launched the Battle of Johnny's Lookout Wang Nai Chong Gap. The 2-day battle covered various parts of Johnny's Lookout, which was situated at the east of Mount Nicholson, with northern embankment of Wang Nai Chong Reservoir.
In the battle, the Japanese army was split into 2 fronts to launch pincer movements towards Wang Nai Chong Gap, with one rushing the post to Pillbox 1 and Pillbox 2 on the western lobe of Johnny's Lookout, whereas another one moved and pushed up Stanley Gap Road from the east. The objective of the fronts was to capture Wang Nai Chong Gap, then the Little Gap, and Wen Chai Gap at the northern end of Mount Cameron, and ultimately the Magazine Gap about the battle box at Victoria Barracks.
From the 13th of December, the Japanese invaders were just one narrow stretch of water away from a targeted Hong Kong island. Seizing the opportunity to destroy much of the island's military infrastructure with aerial and artillery bombardments, the Japanese army triggered a wall of counter-battery fire against the Hong Kong defenders.
With all forces back on the island, the defending Hong Kong forces underwent a reorganization. The 2 new brigades formed comprised of the East Brigade under Wallis and the West Brigade under J.K. Rawson. The dividing line ran due south from the eastern part of Causeway Bay.
The West Brigade consisted of the Punjabis on the waterfront and the Winnipeg Grenadiers and 4th, 5th, and 7th Corps of the HKVDC behind them, with the Royal Scots forming a bridge between the 2 Indian battalions and 6 Corps HKVDC in a number of locations. The Middlesex manned the majority of the pillboxes defending the island and therefore reported into both brigades.
Well before midnight on the 18th of December, the 5th and 7th Rajputs ceased to exist as a fighting unit. killed, wounded, captured, or simply isolated. They had been torn apart as the Japanese assault troops charged through them and made for higher ground. By dawn, the assault paused in the west thanks to the refusal of the HKVDC Fusiliers to let them pass. But the invaders' penetration to the south has reached Wongnaichong Gap.
It seems that we have arrived at the starting point of our journey, the battlefield of anti-aircraft gun battle.
The series of the assault at midnight on 18th of December 1941 opened the prelude at the Wongnaichong battle. The whole night was actually dominated by the fighting of the gap.
This position we are standing now was occupied by the 7th Battery 12 Heavy Anti-Aircraft Regiment with two mobile 3.7-inch anti-aircraft guns which shoot down a Japanese aircraft on December 16th. And this position was defined by the number 3 HK volunteer company and HQ company.
Okay, I think that's quite awesome. Let's explore more. This dilapidated structure used to be one of the 3 pillboxes in Wongnaichong Gap.
This one we just see now has 4 loopholes altogether.
Yes, that's true. By the way, the relics are now covered by thick layer of overgrown vegetation. Although the Wongnaichong Gap is designated an educational trail in the memory of the decisive battle, the fortifications here are not really well managed.
Yes, that was the point. Their site model or management is problematic to a certain extent.
Yeah, being open to the public, the slight lack of renovation and intellectual investment, the military structure have been encroached by vast amount of plantation, and the rotting and corrosion of the sidewalk caused to lack of proper maintenance of the site.
It seems that is falling into a dream. We have set up this field for educational and commemoration purposes, but we are not very well with preserving the battlefield which we claimed as a source of collective memory.
The battles in Pillbox 1 and Pillbox 2 were very fierce. Johnny's Lookout 1 and 2 were overrun, while Johnny's Lookout 3 was bypassed by no later than 3 a.m. The Burkett's platoon held its position until the afternoon.
At 6:20, Pillbox 1 opened fire at an estimated 400 enemy soldiers on the southern part of the right. At 6:30, Pillbox 1 poured deadly MG fire on enemy troops moving up ridge between the right and Stanley Gap.
In 10 minutes' time, the Japanese climbed up the slopes from the right in an attempt to overrun Pillbox 1, but were repulsed. At 6:45 a.m., Pillbox 1 fired at the enemy rushing to Wongnaichong Gap and the police station Knoll, and heavy casualties were resulted again.
At 7:40, the Japanese were in possession of the whole Jardin's lookout area except the pillboxes, signifying the loss of heavy AA gun position and the bunkers in the vicinity. By 8:30, Stanley Gap was lost, and efforts were concentrated to take Pillbox 1 and Pillbox 2.
At 6 p.m., all the remaining defenders except Sergeant White had been wounded. Some even died. As a Japanese officer hoisted a flag of truce, the defenders couldn't help but surrendered and were taken prisoners.
Those who couldn't walk were left to die. The Japanese respect for the heroism of the defenders was manifested, because K-tips or wounded were simply bayoneted on the spot elsewhere.
And finally, The Wongnaichong Gap was eventually captured by the Japanese after 16 hours of fighting.
The loss of Wongnaichong Gap had two implications. First, the severance of the East Brigade from the West Brigade. Second, the beginning of the final collapse of British resistance on Hong Kong Island.
Right beside the petrol station is an excavated bunker, part of a former complex of bunkers which used to be headquarters of West Brigade. A crossfire of machine guns between defenders and the Japanese broke out here, with the invaders making several bayonet charges before capturing the position.
The battle that took place at West Brigade headquarters stood witness to the bravery of the Canadian commander, J.K. Lawson. In recognition of Lawson's bravery and to honor his death, the Japanese erected a plaque that shed light on his heroic acts.
On the 19th of December, suspecting the position being too exposed, Lawson initiated moving to the Black Sling. However, by 7 a.m. in the morning on the next day, they were already under attack.
Lawson called for help, and elements of the Royal Scots and the Punjabis did their best to reach him, but the majority were prevented from advancing by the Japanese ambushes.
By 10 a.m., the West Brigade headquarters was under heavy machine gun fire, and Lawson commanded that the troops break out rather than surrender. Regretfully, no sooner had Brigadier Lawson went out to fight, had he got machine gun shots to the thigh and sacrificed.
In their attempt to escape, most of the others in this position failed and were also shot dead eventually. After the fall of the West Brigade, the invasion was never ceased, although the nearby headquarters of decoy Winnipeg Grenadiers held out in all strengths. Lawson himself was originally buried by the Japanese on this site, but was later reinterred at Saiwan.
This is the site where your grandfather sacrificed his life.
I guess yes. My grandfather, he commanded the West Brigade from a bunker dug into the hillside over there. Attempts to reinforce the area failed. Refusing to withdraw, his bunker was overrun. His last words were to his commanding officer were that he was going outside to fight in order to gain respect and to die with honor. Unfortunately, that happened. In doing so, he lost his life, thereby earning the admiration of the comrades and the enemy for his heroic deeds. Back there when I was in England, my father and my neighbors told me that he was a very generous and very noble man. Although I never saw him, I never got to see him. But yes, I do believe that he was a gentleman, and I would have loved to see him. I guess that's the story of him. Yeah. Oh no, it's fine, it's fine. It's time for me to go back to England now. Probably I'll get to meet you some other day. Bye, it was nice meeting you. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone, I'm Ashwin and I was a part of movie, and now I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of types of conservation. There are mainly 4 types of conservation: historical trail, museum, restricted access area, and open access area. Right now I'm going to talk about historical trail. Historical trail is cheap, but there is not enough protection of the structure, and with the lack of information too. It's also hard for the people to reach that place. In contrast, museum is very informative to tourists as well as local people. It is well organized and the historical relic is under well protection. However, the operating and construction of the museum cost quite a lot. The original structure of the site may be damaged, so it is hard to reach the ultimate goal of sustainability. For the restricted access area, the site is under well protection. One point for which we should be concerned about is that the citizens cannot reach the site easily, which means it loses the meaning of keeping the collective memory. And now the last type, which is open access area. This kind of conservation usually causes damage to the site and may eventually become a rubbish bin. We can call that a rubbish bin because we could actually make out that there were so many rubbish out there. So yeah, that's the ill effect of open access area. That's it from my end. That's all I'm going to talk about, the advantages and disadvantages of types of conservation. Thank you.
One natural gap is hard to reach as it is far away from urban centers, so not many people notice there is a historical trail. Batteries and pillbox are spread among the hills with plenty of rubbish. Damage can be seen on the structure. Most importantly, historical information is not adequate in the site, so I don't think historical trail is the most suitable method to conserve the One Natural Gap.
Combination of museum and historical trail is a new idea to conserve heritage, while turning a battery into another usage. For example, a resting places is a good way to conserve heritage too. And I think site duplication to a places which is more reachable and showing citizens the historical TV program is a brilliant way to conserve heritage too. Apart from that, turning the inside structure of a building to another purpose is the most suitable way for Hong Kong to conserve heritage.
As for the conservation of military heritage, one successful example is definitely the Fort Canning Park in Singapore. Compared to the conservation of cultural and military heritage in Hong Kong, the historical backgrounds, the methods of conservation, as well as the effects are quite different from Singapore. So let me first introduce some of the historical backgrounds about the park. The Fort Canning Park in Singapore is indeed served as a headquarters of Singapore-based district before World War II in the 1940s. And in 1942, the Japanese invaded the headquarters until the end of the occupation. And in 1945, the British Army resumed control and handed over control to the Singaporean military in 1963, and then handed over control to the Singapore Armed Forces in 1966. The fort was reopened on the 13th of February, 1970. The Fort Canning Park in Singapore is under the active management by the government, where vegetation was removed and also the ruins of ancient brick buildings were revealed. Additionally, walking trails are built systematically, such that visitors could travel to different heritage spots during the trip. Unlike Hong Kong, there is no active management for many heritage sites nearby, and no linkage is formed between heritage in a certain area. They are all very scattered, where piecemeal heritage can be found everywhere. As the Fort Canning Park provides historical, educational, and cultural experiences, and hence becomes venue for theatre carnivals, art festivals, as well as starlight cinemas. In general, it serves as an important green lung as well for Singapore's downtown city area, while people enjoy leisure time in the park, thus drawing more attention of the general public. In Hong Kong's conservation policy, probably more educational, cultural, or even leisure elements could be incorporated into the conservation design and methods so as to raise public awareness and achieve conservation purposes effectively.
There are many examples of successful heritage conservation in Singapore, such as Spice Garden, a replica of the first experimental botanical established by Sir Stamford Raffles. Gothic Gates, a gaze in Gothic style, where a Christian cemetery used to stand, and also Fort Canning Green, which was once a graveyard for some 600 Christian graves. In comparison to Hong Kong, I think building a large green area like Fort Canning Park is not quite feasible, as the land supply here is tense due to the high population density. Besides, the general public lack an awareness towards historical conservation because of insufficient promotion and proper education.
Conservation doesn't just depend on government. Engagement of citizens is very important. To conserve historical heritage, especially military heritage, walking trail can be used to link the heritage and citizens together. We need information board where the public are able to understand the history behind the site. At the same time, promotion is needed, like internet and TV program. Historical heritage can be promoted as highlight of a district, like in Central, where the sites scattered all around the area. A habit of entertainment and conservation is a new idea of conservation, which creates a win-win situation to raise the interest of the public generation.
I think profits and conservation is not a contradiction. I mean, commercial considerations in heritage conservation, for example, profits, taxation, financial grants or loans, is very important concerning heritage conservation. But it is not the only consideration of financial profit. Of course, when we conserve heritage, the cost will be high. We have to repair or maintain or rehabilitate old buildings. In regards to other competitive clients, community can play extra like taxes or donations for conservation. I think maybe conservation leads to a loss of development rights, for which owner receive compensation. I think this is a real big challenge that the government have to face. That's the cost of not conserving. In order to sustain a more diversity economy, on the other side, they have to be think of how to maintain a sustainable conservation to really conserve our heritage and to maintain progress. So I think that this is a contradiction.
Heritage conservation should share a slice of sustainable development in any city. Instead of merely displaying historical artifacts, we should make heritage conservation a living and functional part of the community. In an attempt to foster cultural identity and pride, conservation is a way to enrich the historical environment and to enrich citizens' cultural, social, and economic lives. Different methods of conservation, for example, setting up historical trails or museums, opening, restricting, or closing access to certain historical sites, should be well adopted under specific circumstances and needs. Whether these methods are used alone or as a combination, a prerequisite is that these historical sites should be well preserved with a balance of satisfying present and future needs.